I'm kidding.
Honestly, for computing, it was just read the textbook.
Hello and welcome back to Study With Additti. My name is Additti and this channel is dedicated to revision tips and tricks along with much more to help make your schooling life a whole lot easier. Today I've got a very special guest with me named Anna.
Hey.
And today we're going to be talking on how to revise computer science, also known as computing. So we've got a few notes with us as usual. So if we look down, that's why. If you watch my GCSE results video, you will know that I didn't do computing GCSE myself, and as a result I don't do computing A-level. Anna here doesn't do computing A-level, but she did do computing GCSE, so she has a lot of knowledge about the topic, and so she's just going to share that with you. I'm just going to intercept.
Since it's a subject that's, well, a lot very computer based, there's often a tendency not to make notes, but actually it's quite useful to do so. When it comes to making notes, a good way is to go about it by looking at either the specification, or if you have a textbook with bullet points at the front of the chapters, using that as your guide and developing that, because often that matches the specification to kind of guide your revision a bit. Because with computing, it's not so much that there's lots and lots of content you need to learn. There is content and you just need to practice it.
Was there a specific textbook that you used with the bullet points at the start of each chapter?
Yes. So that was the textbook that was issued to us by the school in an online format, and it's called AQA GCSE 9-1 Computer Science by PG Online, and it was by S. Robson and PM Heathcote. So that is quite a good textbook. It had everything you need in, and it wasn't full of waffle, to be honest.
That's good.
Another good revision guide that I found super helpful is the GCSE Success 9-1 Computer Science Revision Guide by Let's, because it showed everything in a very colourful format and it had mind maps after every subunit, so you could really visualise each topic in your mind. And that was very, very helpful, especially coming towards the end of the exams, when there's obviously a lot of pressure to remember everything all at once. It was invaluable. Another textbook, well, not textbook, more of a revision guide. This time you can get it online, often for free from some sites. It's called the Zigzag AQA GCSE 9-1 Revision Guide, and that was actually full of, different pages. It's not as colourful as the Let's one, but that also had some really nice points, and it was in a very good manner, especially because I feel like it was a little bit more in-depth than the Let's one. So if you're aiming for A stars, 8s, 9s, then you might want to consider that as well, because the Let's Revision Guide is great, but you do need a little more to build on. So that's the notes. You don't really need to make as many notes for computing, but you should make some ideally.
To be honest, with the zigzag one that you were saying, like even if it isn't colourful, you're making notes from that and you can make them as colourful as you like, so.
That's notes. If your school gives you any handouts, any worksheets, then obviously use that.
Again, like using resources that your school gives you that I mentioned in my How to Revise Maths video.
If your school teaches computing using PowerPoints, you could request your teachers for a copy of those PowerPoints, so you won't have to write out everything and you can just make notes on them.
Often teachers are happy to do this, and your school might even have like a shared platform that they use. So we used to have a Moodle, but it's not in use anymore. So things like that, they can put stuff on there and everyone can access it. So if your school has that, then use it. If you don't know if your school has that, then find out and use it if it does. So how did you structure your notes?
The way I structured my notes is that I looked at my book, and if there was any key points, I would just write
like the bullet points at the start of your chapters in your textbook.
So I would build on those bullet points, and when I came to the actual exam, I would have a list of those bullet points, and underneath I would have all of the relevant things I would need. I would also reference the specification in my notes, so that I would have a fully comprehensive set of notes which weren't full of writing, but they had everything I need.
Yeah, a lot of the time, the specification thing, a lot of the time they reword things in the specification and make those questions. So if you know the specification inside out and you know which bit of work links to where, I think I said this in my How to Revise Geography video, you'll get a very good mark because you know exactly what to write for each question.
But even after all the advice I've given, if you still don't want to make notes, definitely at least read the textbook. If you can, write on your books and use those as your notes. Obviously notes are better, more condensed, but still.
Like if you're running out of time or
Yes.
anything, but
Then-
like notes are better because they're more personalised to you. A textbook can have like, oh, did you know? And you don't really know you don't need to know did you knows for your exam.
That's why the Let's revision guide was so good, because it didn't have as many did you know things. It was just the basic what you need to know.
That's good.
So this is not a sponsored video or anything, but it is a really good revision guide and you should definitely check it out. In terms of making notes, you need to consider how much weightage you're going to give to each subunit as well, because obviously you have fundamentals of algorithms, programming, computer systems, cybersecurity, ethic, legal, environmental impacts, and that last bit often gets left right to the end. And there are some questions that come up more often, some really wordy questions, and it's worth making a note of those types of questions and learning, you know, making notes on the last few chapters.
Like writing the question at the top and then writing like
Yeah.
a mark scheme almost. To be honest, you could do that with any subject really. Like I think with chemistry, our teacher said to write commonly occurring questions and then write like bullet points for each.
Yeah. So in computing, there are some types of, you know, in some chapters you'll be talking about how to do trace tables and things like that. You don't really need notes as developed notes for those as you need for them asking you about magnetic tape storage versus optical discs.
No
And
idea
for
what
that,
this is.
for that obviously, when you're looking at different storage types and, you know, what's the best and reasons why, etc., you need a wordy answer, and it's worth, you know, making notes, especially for those big questions, those wordy answers. Another thing is that the last few topics often get left out and pushed towards the end of the year, and when it does come up, it's like, oh my gosh, learn it.
Yeah, cramming. That
It's
happens.
not good, and actually, if you're gonna make notes, it's worth making notes, like good notes, especially for the last few topics, because there's quite a lot of
Like it's still part of the
material.
specification. Just because it came up later in the year doesn't mean they're not going to give it to you.
So another major part of your GCSE course is your NEA.
In other words, that is coursework.
Yeah, basically, your non-examined assessment. And in our year, it was quite something in our year, because initially 20% of our GCSE was going to come from the marks from this coursework. Previously, it was an examined piece of coursework. Now it's not examined because it's a computing piece of coursework. And as you would expect with a piece of computing coursework, people who do the subject go online quite a bit all the time during lessons, and the coursework, the programs are used and they're done on a computer where you can access this thing called the internet. And on the internet there are solutions to all these problems. So obviously,
Didn't think of that.
it got leaked. People were going on websites, just taking their answers, plagiarizing again and again and again. So the exam boards were like, nah, this ain't working. So they cancelled it, much to our dismay.
Basically.
It was frustrating.
So from the second year onwards in the new GCSE, coursework will not be marked.
No. And a good thing, because we actually thought we would have coursework right up until, I believe, January or so.
Yeah.
So that whole period, the winter holidays, we were all stressing about whether we need to do the coursework or not, because if we did need to do it, then we would have barely any time to have to produce like a really good piece of work. But at the same time, we didn't want to spend so much time on a coursework which wouldn't give us any marks, and we would rather spend it on
But you didn't
revising
know
for the
that at the
topics.
time, did you?
No, so we were stuck in this kind of weird limbo. Now you guys are quite lucky that you don't have to live through that period of torture. Well, not torture, but it wasn't very nice. But the good thing for you is that you can do this piece of coursework and are free to use the internet, to go online, look for different problems, different solutions, and use that for your own coursework. And also, you don't have to spend more than the allocated 20 hours, or you don't need to spend more time on it thinking about it than is necessary. And it's a much better use to spend your time actually revising for the topics that will come up in the papers.
Because they are going to be marked.
That's going to be marked. The coursework isn't. So while it's useful, it's not essential, especially because it's done in a programming language which you won't even be tested on in the exam.
By the way, you do actually have to do it, so make sure you do it and not leave it.
Usually schools tell you when to do it, but I wouldn't do it at the last minute, because that's when the stress of all your subjects in GCSE starts accumulating. That's when you need to focus on what is going to be assessed, which is not the non-examined assessment.
So make sure you just put minimal effort into it, because if it's not being marked, like, what is the point at the end of the day?
At the same time, if this is a subject that you're interested in, it's worth pursuing, spending a little bit of time on the non-examined assessment, especially because it builds those logical skills.
Yeah.
So you can either build your logical skills through the NEA, which is a good idea as long as you don't spend too much of your time, especially at home, researching.
Because in the end, the GCSE matters, not the coursework.
Yeah. But if you don't want to spend that much time on the NEA, what you could do is to actually figure out pseudocode. Now, pseudocode is basically something that comes before any programming language. It's the basic computing knowledge that you write on a piece of paper or wherever, and that gets translated into different programming languages. It's the basic what happens here, what happens there.
Like basic logic in English, basically.
Yeah. Well,
basic logic in English.
Even more simplified than English. It's just like this arrow, that.
Yeah.
Literally. Basic baby computing language, essentially.
Teaching guide thing.
Now, AQA, and I'm sure other boards as well, they all say that there's no set pseudocode, because obviously it's logic. However, AQA do have a kind of standard. They do have almost set pseudocode that they tend to use and they like their teachers to use. So obviously, if you write that pseudocode in the exam,
it's going to look great, honestly.
Yeah, and
like the mark scheme is most likely going to have the example of what you're writing. So if they match up, the examiner is going to be like, oh yes,
tick, tick, tick.
This person knows it.
And there's not going to be any doubt about whether you got it right or wrong. So that, and the way you find out about that is that you look at the teaching guide, not the student guide, but you go on the AQA website and find the teaching guide to pseudocode.
Is there anything in the student guide that's useful?
Yes. So basically, for each different aspect of computing, maybe variable assignment, constant assignment, Boolean expressions, selection, all the different things you might need, subroutine definition, calling a subroutine, string length, position of a character, anything that you would need in your Python or Scratch or whatever program you're doing, the pseudocode that you would need for it, and the basic functions that you're using. It has examples of those functions, as well as the pseudocode that that AQA would be using. So for example...
That's really good.
Yeah, so it really breaks it down, and if you can learn this sort of pseudocode language AQA use, obviously you'll be at quite an advantage. So that is very, very helpful. So definitely look at that. That will give you an edge when it comes to pseudocode language, using pseudocode, especially because in the tests they do ask you theory-related questions, but they do also want you to make programming, like do programming in some of the questions where you are expected to write in pseudocode. So they might give you something about how to set up a security system, and they might give you some parameters to do it in, or they might give you a piece of code and they might ask you what does this part of the pseudocode do? And obviously, since it's going to be in that AQA format, if you read and know how they use it, then you'll know exactly what's happening where, what is I doing here, what impact does it have on the code,
sense.
Where's the mistake? Literally, that is quite a common question that came up. Where is this mistake in this piece of code? What's the function of I? What's the function of R? What does this do? What happened if this piece of code didn't exist? what are the different types of errors that could happen if you don't add another space bar, basically.
You've really got to
something
think
like
about
that.
it logically
Yeah.
for that, I'm guessing.
And obviously, use the teaching guide. And obviously for practice, what's better than you doing worksheets and questions, essentially. Now worksheets, you could ask your teachers for worksheets. Yeah. So my teacher gave me worksheets for homework and also classwork, and I think they were set by PG Online, which is the company of the textbook we were using, and they, So I used their PowerPoints and also their worksheets, and obviously you can go over it with your teacher. You might do it in class. They were quite useful because
And they're most likely gonna like link with the textbook, I'm guessing.
Yes.
It's more of a coherent way of revising that way.
Absolutely. So do those worksheets, very, very useful. For more questions, look at past papers. You have access to the specimen papers online. Do them. Well, you might want to save them for later on in the year, but definitely do them. And also, this is something I didn't really know about before, but before our year, we didn't have a computing GCSE, we had ICT.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my god.
I think it was like
ICT is like baby IT.
No. Okay, so ICT, it was more ICT and computing. So they had, I think, a paper 1 and a paper 2. Now, paper 1 was more ICT, physical components of a computer, not necessarily RAM and stuff, but what does the mouse kind of do and the joystick, and it was slightly outdated, not gonna lie. What is this type of file? It was quite Excel, PowerPoint, those kind of things. So that would be paper 1. Paper 2 for the ICT is actually computing, to be honest. It's more computing based. And if you do the series of paper 2s, past paper 2s for the previous syllabus, that could be quite useful because obviously you don't have access to many papers. But I didn't really know about this until quite late. But now that you guys have time, and if you start now, even if you're in year 11, you could get a lot of them covered, and then you'll obviously have a lot of questions that you would have done.
Yeah,
and that
a lot of questions, yeah.
Yeah, that would give you confidence.
That's a really good tip, yeah.
Another way to get good questions is another thing. This again, I think they uploaded it to the website quite late, or at least I found it quite late. I think about a couple of days before the actual exam, but I'm going to tell you this now so you don't have to be in that same situation as I was, just looking through them and that you can actually do it. These are the supplementary questions. Now, supplementary questions, there's one for paper 1, there's one for paper 2, and I believe paper 3 as well. And these are basically a compilation of questions from previous papers that would link to the topics in the new syllabus, the new specification. And they are done in paper 1, paper 2, paper 3 by topic, and they're actually relevant. So if you do the supplementary questions, it is quite useful, especially because they have a mark scheme attached as well. So it's just, the supplementary questions essentially are like another set of specimen papers, but even better, they have separate papers and they're broken down by topic.
Yeah, you might want to try those for like revising for end of unit tests. Did you have those?
Yeah, we did.
So
yeah,
stuff like that. So you don't want to be doing those type of questions just before the exam. Leave the specimen questions just before the exam because those are going to be more like, they're going to draw from different topics. These supplementary questions are going to be like, you're going to know the topic, so I feel like that becomes a bit easier. So if you do know the topic, then use them for end of unit tests and just smaller things, or just earlier in the year.
So obviously do past papers. If you want, you can also buy one of those revision guides that have practice questions.
Oh, CGP workbook or something?
Yes, I actually got the CGP exam practice workbook. Unfortunately, again, I got it quite late, so I didn't have time to do many of those. But when I did look at the questions, they did seem quite good.
Oh, that's good.
So that's very good.
They might have a grade 8 to 9 workbook as well for computing.
Maybe.
Because I know for maths they do, but maybe it's just for maths, I don't know.
So that is definitely worth you know, doing some research over. Another thing that was very, very useful is that there's a YouTube channel. There's a gentleman who does topic videos for computing for the different papers within and the different boards. I think she can put a link in the description below to that channel, I'm sure. But it's a very, very good channel, and it had all the videos broken down. I would definitely, including an analysis of a specimen paper. So he basically essentially does the specimen paper or marks a specimen paper, looks at the mark scheme, sees what you need to do, annotates it and talks about it, which is very good.
Oh, I see. Yeah, those kind of videos.
Where they just look at the paper, say where, you know, what are the key things you need to know, and essentially breaks down on how to do the question. And they're very good. And if you have time, there's literally hundreds of videos for computing in the different topics. Watch them. For me, they were absolutely invaluable. Yeah, they were brilliant.
Hi! I think that's all we can really say on computing for GCSE. If you do computing A-level at all, please share any tips and tricks that you have in the comments below, because neither of us take it, and honestly I have no clue about computing at all. So that's why I have Anna here with me today. So thank you for watching. If you like this video, please smash the like button, and also if you haven't already subscribed, please do that, and also hit the bell icon while you're at it. I hope to see you in another video, and for now, goodbye!